Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are the opinions of the participants only and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions or comments on our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 190. Almost to 200. Episode 190, Hermeticism. My name's John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in Fairfax, Virginia, amongst other things. I'll hand it off to Mike the Intern for his introduction.
Hello, Mike the Intern here from Triandria Lodge, number 780 in Rock Creek, Ohio, and I am the sitting junior steward and lodge education officer. And it's good to be here tonight.
Heyo to the Leo. Thank you, Mike. Juan Sepulveda, how are things in your neck of the woods?
Everything nice down here in the south. Juan Sepulveda from Orange Blossom Lodge, number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Thank you, Juan. Jason Richards.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Jason Richards, Worshipful Master of Acacia Lodge, number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, for 2 more shows, and member of the Colonial Lodge, number 1821 in the District of Columbia.
Hey, I was going to let you know that the other guys in line had to bail, so if you could just be master for like another 2, maybe 3 years, that'd be great.
Yeah. No.
Did you get that memo?
No, it's the TPS reports, right? The cover sheet. No. My wife would kill me. They can have to do a Masonic funeral for their own master.
Last but not least tonight, Robert Johnson.
Hey guys, RJ, Waukegan Lodge number 78, Waukegan, Illinois, current sitting secretary and district deputy. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Once again, this week's episode is sponsored by Worshipful Brother Ryan J. Flynn, a Masonic artist and patent designer out of New Hampshire. Since 2010, Brother Flynn has been using a variety of mediums to capture the beautiful Masonic architecture, people, medieval style patents, and other Masonic works of art. Brother Ryan is available to do custom commissioned works for Masons and Masonic lodges. Little fun fact, when I was over at MasoniCon, he had a nice brand new portrait of Albert Pike done, and apparently a brother came up to him and said, I would like to buy that. And he says, well, actually, this is just for illustrative purposes. This is actually already sold. I just had permission to display it as kind of my portfolio, and it's going back to the original owner. And to which the brother replied, I still want that. So if you could I'll commission a brand new original, identical replica of that at your earliest convenience. So that was really, really fascinating to see that happen live, and just again, a testimony to his talents. So congratulations, Ryan. If you're interested in commissioning a piece with Brother Ryan, contact him directly at ryan@ryanjflynn.com or visit his website at www.ryanjflynn.com. And of course, Brother Ryan created the patent for our 300 event last June, so check it out. First up in Masonic news, we have our last episode of November, which means it's time for an update for our No Shave fundraiser. And remember, if you've been waiting to the end, because it's like an eBay auction, you have to come in and snipe at the last minute. Yes, you too can go over to noshave.org/team/T, short for TMR. And let's check the scoreboard. As of right now, the leader is the Juan Sepulveda, clink, with $350 total raised, which has us going up to 40% of our goal. Again, it is the last week. I think it's been a fun experiment. And remember, now's the time to get in, because if amongst many outstanding prizes you'll get for being the largest donor, you could still get a great deal by donating the top amount to this team. And thereby get one of Dave Bacon's famous handcrafted, hand-painted aprons. Go check that out.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody out there today got multiple emails from multiple rights from multiple charities saying it's Giving Tuesday. But I know you guys all waited, right? Because this is the one you wanted to go for.
Because we give stuff back.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you so much for the people that have already pledged, and it means a lot. You know, this is a cause that is near and dear to many of us, and you know, if we can help a little bit, making strides to, you know, eradicate or keep under control this horrible disease, it is a great thing. So thank you so much.
If you're questioning who to donate to, just take a look through tonight's show and see who has the best beard coming through or continuing to go through. Look, everyone's doing their nice profiles. Man, there's just so much handsomeness here. I don't know what to do. Well, except for Robert.
Or go for the grayest beard.
There you go. Next up, I could have sworn this was from The Past Bastard, but it wasn't. Jason, what did you find?
So actually, I got this from Mike Overturf in Olney, I believe, Illinois. It was there, yeah, in Olney, Illinois, back this past week. I hate like ads that pop up and start playing automatically. There was a big parade in Olney last week, and the Shriners were in the parade, driving their mini Corvettes. Although, you know, they all of the news articles that we found actually call them go-karts. Shriners hate calling the mini Corvettes go-karts. But essentially, one of the Shriners says his steering wheel locked up, and he veered off the street into the crowd and struck 3 pedestrians with his not a go-kart.
All with non-life-threatening injuries.
Yes, 3 folks who were struck were transported to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries.
I don't want to make light of the situation, but my big question was, did they go to Shriners Hospital?
As only if they were children.
Oh, well, you know.
He was aiming for the Knights of Columbus.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, this is what's this? Life imitating art. You can't make this stuff up. But glad to hear everybody is okay. And Jason, you also got something in the mail today, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So I wanted to give a little plug out to the Southern California Research Lodge. They do Fraternal Review magazine, and it's usually really, really good. They've been very gracious to the hosts of TMR in the past because they focus a lot on podcasts and really cool, you know, articles about Masonry. And since December is the month where we are getting The Last Jedi, or Star Wars Episode 8, in theaters, the Fraternal Review for this month is all about Star Wars and Masonry, the Force and the Light. So this is I've been able to thumb through this. It's really cool. It's got a good 8 or 9 articles just talking about the mythos of Star Wars and the intersection between that mythos and the tenets and teachings of Freemasonry. And so it's really cool. They've actually got a plug-in for Whence Came You, RJ, for the episode that you and Frater O did on Star Wars. I think it was 229. So go ahead and go ahead.
Yeah, we did that episode, and then Mike Jarzabek did a sweet article for Midnight Freemasons, and we had an episode with him. And
didn't Todd Creason do like Freemason or not Yoda?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. We had Bull Garlington on, who's like an award-winning author, talking about the hero's journey. there's a lot of really interesting similarities between the two, and it's not surprising that they did that. And brilliant marketing.
Oh yeah. No, so this is the non-limited edition version. But check it out, Southern California Research Lodge. They do great work, and we're big fans of them here at the Masonic Roundtable because they give us free stuff, and it's good free stuff.
Today I learned Jason can be bought.
Everybody has their price, John.
That's true. All right, let's get into this week's topic, which is, I know, something that a lot of you esoterically minded philosophers have been waiting for, is on the topic of Hermeticism. I think it's really exciting. We can tell by some of the buzz that it generated when we announced the show episode that this is something that is near and dear to a lot of the like-minded Masons who listen to the show. And even if you're not a Mason yet, hopefully you'll find something interesting and something to contemplate. So to begin, let's talk about this Hermetic philosophy. So Hermeticism is the concept of Hermetic philosophy. So in order to understand what that is, you have to understand, what does the term Hermetic mean? No, it does not mean that you hermetically seal something up, but it might, because the name comes from the Greek god of Hermes. And we have to continue to go backwards in time to find out why this Greek god has become part of this culture to create a system of philosophy. So let's rewind even further back. Before the Roman Empire was heavily purveying the Middle East area in the 3 to 4 BC time frame, there was a lot of local religions. And so in the fact that your religion was the religion of not just your area, but your tribe specifically. And so because trade had not really crossed a lot of these geographic boundaries, there was not a lot of what we would call globalization today. And so new ideas and concepts of different schools of thought and different religions were not as prevalent, because religion was local. It was hyper-local, to use a modern term. And when the Roman Empire came in and started really conquering most of the European and Middle East area, it forced a concept of, we're all reporting to Rome for the taxes. But now, because of all of the traveling going on between the now new Roman Empire, they let the religious communities practice whatever god they wanted to. And I think that was a really smart move for them, because they said, we're not going to take over your culture. We just want you to know that you work for us now, and you're going to pay taxes to us, but go ahead and practice whatever you want. And it was actually, while it seemed benevolent, it was actually a way to control the population, right? To say, you do your thing. But now with this breadth of travel, now people were starting to see different ideas, some similar, some different, some overlapping with their faith, that they had never been exposed to this concept of comparative religion before. And what's happening over time is that these people are now being exposed to so many new ideas. They're starting to kind of go window shopping for other religious context, right? So that's interesting. I didn't know that was an option that was available. I'm going to start maybe not completely converting to that new faith, but maybe I'll take what I like out of that. Maybe I'll take what I like out of this other one. And so what eventually happens is you start to form this syncretic religious school of thought, where it takes kind of the best of all of these different pieces and form a unified series of practices, principles, and philosophies. And so as a result, in the 81 to 3 time frame, you get these different texts there's a lot of texts being written in that time frame, in the post Christ era, that there's a lot of spur of religion, and then you have some of these ancient texts specifically attributed to an individual going by the name of Hermes Trismegistus, and
Who is supposedly Noah's either grandson or great grandson, I believe.
Robert, here's your cue to enlighten us on who is this Hermes Trismegistus character.
Yeah. So
where he's going.
of course, he's three people. It's an amalgamation of three folks, but the first Hermes that's said to have spawned the entire thing is actually in the Book of Enoch refers to him as the son of Cush, and he. I'm trying to think here. Lamech, how many lines is that removed from, or down a line from Noah?
Lamech is the grandson of Noah.
So Hermes comes after Lamech,
I believe.
Lamech, Hermes has the well, yeah, that's where he comes in. He's we'll get into it, but Hermes, the first one.
Lamech is Noah's father.
Okay, so then he takes the pillars that Lamech makes, or the information.
The pillars of Enoch.
Okay, there you go. So he transcribes the pillars, and then Hermes' son finds and translates the pillars, and then after that, his son is Thoth, and essentially, in some traditions, I should say, because this does, like John posited, a lot of different versions of this story, but you can look up a good source material on this is probably in a story form is illustrated Masonry Illustrated. It's like a 7-volume set by Mackey, and Thoth is the one who then takes it and disperses it to the Egyptian people. And then it's credited as writing and astrology and all these things. And then so the three of them together make up Hermes Trismegistus. It's a thrice great. It's three people. It's an amalgamation.
Right. And so Hermes is kind of like this archetype, right? So
yeah,
we can't really prove if it's really a person who existed. May have, it may have not. Manly P. Hall will say in his research that it maybe possibly could have been an actual person, but over time and the oral traditions, right, of telling about this great guy who wrote this awesome philosophical text, you start to deify him, right, into almost an apotheosis, right?
And that's exactly what Graham Hancock also, he proposes that he was probably a real dude, some sort of European guy, and he was deified. The archetype is literally just a placeholder. It's like, you guys, we've talked about the hero with 1,000 faces, right? It's all the same guy. It's the same journey. In this respect, you're looking at Hermes. You're looking at Thoth, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Huandi. You can look at and all of these, I should mention also, in those texts, talk about this archetype, this Hermes person, is a leader of a sect of peoples. So like Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha, you can look those up. Those are pretty prevalent. But they have like a group of people with them. And then you've got, 2 instances in texts where that happens, and they talk about the people. So like the Apikalu, which come from Assyria, and he had 7 sages. Each of them taught a divine science. So the 7 liberal arts. We have Enoch and the 7 angels of the Watchers who taught the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and even an angelic script that they called Passing the River is the name of the script. But it's like the same thing, this keeper of knowledge who has all the best stuff. And it's the same in almost every culture. So, not to get too crazy, but you wonder why that, the same archetyped over multiple continents.
Right. And so really, that is, Hermes itself is a symbol of the universal mind, these common ideas and principles. And that's even where we get Thoth as the creator of thought, which is where we get the word thought from, is from the Egyptian god Thoth. And so what's happening here is once these texts come out, it's taking, again, the best of all these different religions, and we're shifting away from the Greco-Roman the polytheistic cultures, right? Multiple gods. And now transforming all these things into some common principles. And I like the way that Manly P. Hall put it. It's now become a pantheistic monotheism, right? It's not a polytheistic monotheism. It's a pantheistic monotheism in the sense it's taking all these different concepts and putting them in a blender and finding out how all these apply to a monotheistic thing. And this is one of the earliest texts that's describing a purely monotheistic approach going forward.
Yeah, so you have the monotheistic, and then essentially it's poly in a sense that in some instances we're talking about emanations of the one thing, which later goes on to talk about namely those pillars again representing like a sacred masculine, a sacred feminine, which are represented by the sun and the moon, which is the feminine, and then the equilibrium point is Mercury or Quicksilver, which is Hermes or the Rebus.
Wow, that's very heavily loaded in there. I got to pull that all up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so you read about it. It's in the lectures of the 6th degree Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction.
It's a good part for Mike to jump in and talk about what he found as far as how that relates to his research. Go ahead.
Yeah, because what I found from reading Esoterica for doing my Master Craftsman Symbolic Lodge program from the Southern Jurisdiction, I found this image here, which I'll share. It's let's go ahead and get that shared here. And this is actually in the book Esoterica. And these the next parts I'm going to read here actually kind of describe some pieces from this. And it's the square is an instrument. It's actually the compasses and the square lesson 1. Now I've only pulled pieces of this, but in any case, the square is an instrument that can be applied to level surfaces and rectilinear angles only. The earth anciently was supposed to be level with occasional inequalities of hills and valleys. For many practical purposes, it is regarded as level now. In the ordinary operations of surveying it is treated, its spherical shape not being regarded. The surveys of the public lands of the United States are so made, and consequently, the lines of adjoining surveys never coincide. Then it goes on to the compasses are used to describe circles in spherical trigonometry in which the square cannot be used. They are therefore a fit symbol of the sky, the heavens, which form, as it were, the roof of a half sphere, in crossing which the heavenly bodies appear to describe arcs of circles, and the square is a fit symbol of the earth. And he says, and in this image you see a human body with 2 heads, one male and the other female, one with the right hand and the other with the left arm extended. Over the male head is the astronomical sign that denotes the sun, and over the female, that which denotes the moon. And between and above these signs is that which denotes planet Mercury, which again, as RJ pointed out, is another symbol for Hermes. In the hand which is on the male side is a pair of compasses, and in the hand on the female side is the square. These symbols, as you see, were engraved and published over 100 years before what is called the revival of Masonry in 1717. And we know with absolute certainty that their signification was to Hermetic philosophers who used them. It is not a matter of conjecture or speculation, but of absolute certainty of knowledge. The compasses, which are a fit symbol for the heavens, are also a fit symbol of all that is heavenly and spiritual. The square, which is a fit symbol of the earth, is also a fit symbol of all that is earthly and material in nature and man.
Very cool.
Yeah. So
I
I had one other thing that as in my reading, that I thought of with RJ talking there. It's mentioned that Albert Pike wrote that Hermes Trismegistus was a parallel to the Grand Master Hiram he wrote this in his third degree monograph. But honestly, from my opinion, I would have almost tied him to King Solomon. I just wonder what you guys thought on that one.
So I've seen, in fact, one of the presentations I do, like I flip through a handful of archetypes, right? And it's like Hermes, Thoth, and the one I end on is showing that it's Hiram. But I would agree with you that at certain points it probably is a little bit more Solomon-esque. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good observation, Mike.
I wanted to point out in the illustration that you were showing, Mike, for those who are just listening, you have the character that has the two heads, one male and female, and then above him or her, there's the three celestial symbols, and you have the sun above the male, the moon over the female, and then in the middle you have Mercury, right? And representing Hermes. And what I found interesting is that it's almost like a messianic parallel in which Mercury, it's also described in the Hermetic books as the communicator between the heavens and the earth. So Mercury is the intercessor. It's the one that connects the two. So I thought it was interesting that you have this archetype that is the messenger between the celestial and the terrestrial, and it repeats itself in all these different disciplines.
See, that's cool. I hadn't thought of that.
Well, that's fascinating because the Rosicrucian side, how this gets tied in, is some of the Rosicrucian themes are similar to this Hermetic philosophy that we've been talking about. We'll get to some of the specifics in a second here, but because you brought it up, that with Rosicrucianism being primarily a Christian, specifically Trinitarian Christian order, you have the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. If you look at some of the source documents for Christian Rosenkreutz in Fama Fraternatis and the Chemical Marriage of Christian Rosenkreutz, the interesting points of those is that some of the text there could only have been influenced by Martin Luther, right? So we know that there's text in the Fama that is directly influenced by Martin Luther isms, and so it's interesting that if you pull that thread all the way forward, that whether it be Christian Rosenkreutz or Hermes Trismegistus, they're all archetypes for certain things. And in fact, you could argue that even for Christians, it could symbolize the Jesus figure as well. Right.
One of the symbols in even looking at the symbol for Mercury being as a precursor, they talk about in Milton A. Pottinger's book on symbolism. He references even the Christian cross as what they call it's the great equilibrium between the material plane and the spiritual plane, that of being the cross, the intersection of the two. And then when you look at some of the other orders where it's like, the cross with the double spiritual plane, it's an allusion to dying and rebirth. So it's a twofold intersection.
So let me go into some of the text and philosophy, and I'm going to run through it really quick because we could go for hours on each of these topics, and then we'll transition to how it relates to Freemasonry today. So like any religious texts or philosophical ideas, you have some core texts that people reference a lot. And so in Hermeticism, you have things like the Corpus Hermeticum, which is a series of books, books being, not the same way we think of books today, but just pamphlets and ideas put together that are codified, a story of Hermes Trismegistus telling a disciple of his how things like a creation story happened, and some other nuggets of information.
Yeah, John, real quick on that.
Go.
There's actually there's a papyrus that they found in Nag Hammadi that's a conversation between Hermes and a student.
Which is fascinating, right? Yeah. We thought a lot of these things were lost over time or were reconstructed, and maybe some of the stuff was lost. But when Nag Hammadi was found in the 40s, that all of a sudden we've got tangible evidence of some of these things that were almost urban legends at that point. So you have things like the Corpus Hermeticum, and even some things as late as like the 1918, 1920 time frame with the Kabbalion, which, if you haven't read the Kabbalion, it's a really good Hermeticism for dummies, I guess you could call it, because that was my first exposure to it, and I found it very easy to digest. They have audio versions of that. You can check that out as well. But they all kind of say the same thing. And so some of the principles, these syncretic things that they gathered over time, consist of a couple of ideas. Here are some of these ideas. First, there's the Prisca Theologica, which means that this a true theology exists, or another way to say it could be the religion in which all men agree. That this all came from kind of a true source somewhere. There's a concept of as above, so below, which you may have heard in other contexts in esoteric circles. This is where it came from, but also can relate to the macrocosm and microcosm, as the universe, so your body. Then they go into the 3 parts of wisdom of the whole universe, which are explicitly alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. And theurgy specifically being divine magic and trying to attain oneness with the creator. So that's a concept in there. Reincarnation is a concept. Good and evil are concepts. A little bit of the creation story, as I alluded to earlier, which talks about the 7 heavens and 7 planets. You see a lot of the symbolism of 7 show up. I found another thing interesting too, about how the word is very important. The logos, creating the universe. We as Masons are looking for the word, and there's a direct parallel there.
Yeah, in fact, Plato's pattern for the logos is essentially Hermes.
That's cool. And you can't talk about alchemy without talking about the Emerald Tablet, which has also been attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Jason to tell us, so what's all this have to do with Freemasonry?
Hermetic philosophy and Freemasonry, of course, as we talk about the themes here, with Freemasonry, of course, you automatically see a lot of parallels between the themes of Hermetic philosophy and core tenets of the Masonic fraternity. Unfortunately, as far as the intersection of Hermetic philosophy and the fraternity exists, or as far as it goes on an official level, we don't have a lot of records that indicate that Hermetic philosophy played a really big official role in the early days of the craft. Records were very sparse at best. There are a couple sparse records of English lodges that detail research projects and research into Hermeticism. However, if we go over to Scotland in the Scottish craft lodges, we find that the Hermetic influence was much more pronounced. There was actually the Order of the Herodom, which originated among Scots Freemasons, living mostly in or around London. It was formed in the 1730s to correct what these Scotsmen perceived as abuses which had crept into St. John's Masonry. So they thought that the third degree should have been more hermetic. The they really wanted to, again, they wanted to correct those abuses and those innovations in Masonry, as they were. So they ended up forming this group called the Order of Herodom, which again went back to Hermetic and Kabbalistic themes, which included, mystical perambulations that represented the soul's pilgrimage in search of a lost word, a recurring emphasis on numbers, specifically 9, 7, 5, and 3, references to the 7 wonders of the world, allusions to men who are said never to have died, like Enoch, escape from the imprisoning confines of human physicality, admission into a cabinet of wisdom, allusions to Kabbalistic dimensions. These were all major themes in this order of Herodom. After about the 1750s or so, the Grand Lodge of England started cracking down on the Order of Herodom, and the order actually moved at that point to Scotland proper, where it ended up settling in kind of Edinburgh and transferred into what is now called the Royal Order of Scotland. So if you end up being like our good friend and pal Nick Johnson and getting an invite into the Royal Order of Scotland, you can pick up on all of those Kabbalistic and Hermetic themes that we just talked about. That's pretty much what I've got outside of a couple of the Hermetic themes that pop up in Royal Arch Masonry. In a lot of ways, the Royal Arch degree itself is it has a lot of intensely Hermetic themes. A subterranean cave, concealment of text and inscriptions in a vault in order to preserve them from the profane. The legend of an accidental discovery of those secrets by ordinary workers who couldn't understand it at first, but then figured out the significance later on as it was explained to them. The rewarding of those discoverers, and then the revealing of the meaning of that hidden word, which is taken to refer to deity.
Jason, I wanted to mention that you talk about the protection of these principles and this knowledge, but there's also the self-preservation. When you talk about something being hermetically sealed, it's not just the vanity. I think also that it's protection of those who hold the information, because you have so many religious zealots out there that might not have the open-mindedness to even look at these previous practices and previous disciplines, which reminds me, there's a list of 7 principles of Hermeticism that I would encourage the listeners to go check them out. And among them, there's the principle of rhythm, that you have this ebb and flow through life, and that it's intertwined in everything. So there's an ebb and flow, and there's this this cycle that permeates everything. Among it, which is a parallel that I find with Freemasonry, is that you have these religions, disciplines, looking outside of themselves for inspiration and to craft their own rites, basically, and then eventually they turn their gaze from looking outside for inspiration to only focusing at what they already have and allowing nothing external to come in. And then that cycle repeats again, and then you have people within that organization looking outside for inspiration once again, And that's where you have that conflict between the Premier Grand Lodge not wanting anything to do with those involved in Hermeticism. It's like, why are you looking outside when we have everything inside? Yeah, we have everything inside because we looked outside first, you know, and only those people who are able to have that flexibility of basically removing themselves from dogmatism are the ones that are able to eventually enlighten themselves, because they're not bound just by looking at what we have in our tradition. Let's look at other traditions and see what we have in common, you know. So I thought that was I thought that was cool to see that happening in Masonry, and you have it happening in other disciplines too. And yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I was looking back at my notes when I got a chance to catch my breath, and I realized everything I said about the Royal Arch and its connection to Hermetic philosophy is completely incorrect. So disregard all of that. The source that I was reading actually pointed out the Royal Arch as England's further turn away from Hermetic philosophy as opposed to a resurgence and turn to it. So I suck. It's been a long day. I'm out of excuses.
Oh no, that's fine. But the one that did actually turn to look at Hermeticism was the Ecosse order, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
the Order of Herodom, which started around, or was formed by Scots Masons in London, and by the 1750s, after persecution from the Premier Grand Lodge of England, moved over to Scotland and eventually morphed into the Royal Order of Scotland. Yes.
Cool. And I know we're running tight on time, but there's something really cool I found that I wanted to share. There's this part of the Hermetic philosophy that basically delineates 3 stages, or pretty much 3. I describe them as degrees, but there aren't degrees. It's just like 3 phases in life. And they're the nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. And the nigredo is blackness. And what I liked about that is that it kind of correlates with our transition from darkness to light. So you see this progression. The second step is albedo, which is whiteness. In another sense, is all colors, which is white light is pretty much all the colors in the spectrum of light. And then the third one is rubedo, which is redness, and it stands for knowledge or wisdom, and it's the application thereof. Now, the parallel I found with Masonry that I thought was really cool, in addition of the transition from the first step of darkness to that second step of light, is that somewhere along that transition, there's a thing called the cauda pavonis, which is called the peacock's tail. And it's early in the development of a person in the Hermetic philosophy, in which they are hit with all the colors at once. And it's just too much. And I found the parallel because sometimes you have brothers that join the fraternity, and when they're brought from darkness to light, they are in this bliss, like this, like Nick described it, the honeymoon phase, where they're like, holy crap, I want to learn about everything. And they start, pushing their energy everywhere.
Paging Mike the intern.
Reported for duty.
Without a doubt, that's me.
But one of the cool things I found is, like, even though that's admirable when you have all this zeal for all the colors, the further focus and narrowing the spectrum to the red, which in this case represents self-actualizations, self-understanding, further development, it's essential. So it is almost an evolution. You have that honeymoon phase where you have the peacock's tails colors that are, basically mesmerizing you. And it's important that in the middle of that, you progress to narrowing your focus to that one that is going to allow you to reach your highest level of development as a human being. or a spiritual being.
And
Or black.
what color are Scottish Rite caps? Black, white, and red.
And purple and blue and white.
Hey,
Purple, gold
I had a
trim.
good thing going and you ruined it.
Well, you know, one of the things, you know, Jason was talking about kind of some of the origin within Masonry. What's interesting is I've talked about it before, and I talk about it quite a bit actually, is I have an obsession with Eleusis and the mysteries of Eleusis, which is primarily where all degree systems come from in a written sense. The idea that somebody, it's not like I think the only major Greek philosopher who didn't take the mysteries was Socrates. But the rest of them took the mysteries at Eleusis, were initiated in there's still really no clear record on what happened, but there's a pretty good idea of what happened. But the idea that this is a degree or a rite of passage, the play of some sort that happens while Masonry wasn't that in the beginning, right? It was a craft guild thing that kind of evolved into this degree system. That has a foundation in the application of kind of like the way we teach. And Eleusis is said to have gotten their information and the way they confer the degrees from Egypt. So I always kind of, that's like my jab. There are some people who say like Masonry is not Egyptian, and you're right, it's not. But the teaching method is.
And there's this guy named Thoth, but you know.
And this dude named Thoth, yeah, whose dad was Hermes, whose dad was maybe Lamech or related to Noah. So I don't know.
It's all related. It really is.
Oh, and then you got to look up the Persian mysteries because holy cow, you talked about the rainbow getting hit with them, and there's an allusion there in the Persian mysteries. There's a rite of passage where basically dude has to like be quiet for a year, and then he takes a 50-day fast, and then after a 50-day fast, he's brought through like this thing where he's like hit with everything you can imagine until he passes out, and then when he wakes up, he's around his bros, and they're like, "Hey, you did it! Nice job."
I'd have been out at the beginning. I can't keep quiet for a year.
Me neither.
I cannot eat for
Like, but I want to make another podcast.
Hey, but in all seriousness, that was a parallel to one of the Memphis Mizraim degrees, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they built upon those mystery schools. That's pretty cool. All right. You know, we're at that time where we really have to start wrapping it up. Again, we hope we've inspired you to go jump off all these various points. You can tell that there's a lot contained within this philosophical construct, and there's no way we could even cover that in 100 episodes. But we hope we've given you a taste of what Hermeticism really is. And so I'm going to take it back around for everyone to do their last final thoughts and shameless plugs, and we'll end up the night. So let's start with Juan Sepulveda.
All right. Well, this was fun. I did enjoy the research, reading some of these things. Usually when these topics come up, I kind of put a little bit of a barrier myself because my interest lies in the application of disciplines. Like I'm not so like, and it's funny. It's funny, but it's perfect because we have all kinds of interest among us here at the Masonic Roundtable, because Jason loves the looking back at the history and, sharing all these nuggets of where things come from. And, you have RJ going and looking at different philosophies and different things and kind of like finding these parallels. I like the whole application of it. It's like, why should I even care? That's the whole question for me. Like, why does it even matter? And when I push myself and I, take the encouragement of brothers like John and Mike to actually go out and look, then I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it does matter. Here's look at the parallels I found. And I can see how, these people are, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, they have the same preoccupations and they're looking at life in a very similar way than we are. And this is how they solve it. Damn, that's exactly how I, managed to solve things in my life. So, it's very refreshing to see this whole thread and how there's this symbiotic relationship among us where we push each other further out of our comfort zone and, into further light. So I hope this had the same effect in you. If you thought, oh, this is going to be super boring, like who cares? And then you heard some cool stuff that excited you, found some threads to pull in the future, then, our job is done. And I appreciate you being a part of it. So my shameless plug, Cyber Monday, I did some like dumb discounts on some stuff I've never done before. Some dumb discounts. And I am too tired tonight to go in and fix all those prices. So you got tonight, Cyber Tuesday, baby. Go in there, take advantage of these, because once I put them up, they're not gonna go back that down for a long time. I don't think it's necessary to. That was bad. Anyway, for those of you who support my work, thank you so much. TheWindingStairs.com. That's where you'll find all the art that you've seen in the pages. You can find them there, especially tonight. And depending on how late I can sit down tomorrow, you have a couple hours in the morning. Don't risk it. Go tonight and get your stuff.
All right. Thanks, Juan. Good stuff. Mike the intern.
So, hey, Juan, by the way, man, I took advantage of one of those already.
You sure did.
Yeah, anyway, I really enjoyed this tonight. And, for me, I've been studying the Master Craftsman program for the Symbolic Lodge. And, that the first things I was reading was about the, Hermeticism tied to Freemasonry. And, I've been curious, but I haven't been curious enough to dig into it to study Hermeticism. But I've heard about its connections to this for quite a while. And honestly, this has, sparked a lot more interest in me to dig a little deeper. And that's really what this has done for me tonight. And rereading some of that stuff that I did right out of Esoterica has really sparked it deeper. So, yeah, this is where it's at for me. I like it.
It's because you're still in the honeymoon phase. That's why.
That's it.
Good. Thanks, Mike, for joining us. Robert Johnson.
All right. So, Juan talked about being practical. Some of the best ideas of how this is practical, really, if you read just the regular old Scottish Rite, Ritual Monitor, or you pick up Rex Hutchins. He did Bridge to Light, right? It's Rex? Right. Yeah. Bridge to Light. Read the 5th and 6th degree. I think the 6th degree is Intimate Secretary. There is a lot of information of what we talked about this evening within that degree. And specifically, there's an allegory there that you can read that essentially is very easy to apply to modern day living. And you can instantly read that and think, oh yeah, me every time I go to work, or me every time I'm at a lodge meeting. So think about that when you read that. Also, as Hermeticism is kind of this almost foreign concept, even though it's a Western tradition, the way we're talking about it. It's almost a foreign concept to a lot of Freemasons, and that's okay. Like, if this stuff makes you like, I don't get it, this is weird stuff, that's okay. It's my understanding that a lot of the Hermetic values within Masonry can be looked at, as Mike talked about, within that Esoterica, which is based on the Scottish Rite craft degrees. The Scottish Rite craft degrees. So the first 3 degrees within the Scottish Rite system, not the York system that 99% of us have gone through. It's the Scottish system. And when you do that, you realize some of the other symbols, the most important symbol of which I think Pike talks about is the tetracytes, which is, of course, that the the delta with the 10 points in it, right, that make up the triple tau. And so that kind of basis should lead you then, if we all had that, maybe we would do a little bit better with understanding kind of this bridge into the Hermetic philosophies. So think about that. And again, a practical application. If you're a Northern Jurisdiction member, check out the 28th degree. It's pretty good. It deals with a secret society. Maybe they're Rosicrucians, maybe they're not, and maybe they, in this degree, they quote unquote they figure out Freemasonry. They're like, what is this thing? Let's infiltrate it and make it, put our Hermetic practices, in a way that the 90% of the world can understand inside this philosophy. It's kind of interesting. Check that out. And that's all. So thanks for watching this show. This was a super cool episode to do. I know John and I nerded out like gangbusters for this. I wanted to mention we got a new thing going, Masonic Curators, where I'm releasing some just short 2 to 5 minute videos about little Masonic items, around. And for a lot of guys out there, maybe they're thinking like, well, I don't give a rat's behind about RJ's collection of dusty trinkets. But here's the cool part. Like, if you go to the page, MasonicCurators.com, you can click on submission, and there's a guidelines there. If you follow those and you link me that video, you make a video about your stuff and send it in, and we want to put that up. So this is like kind of belongs to everybody. It's not just RJ. Of course, a lot of those videos are probably going to be me to filler, right? Because I'm not going to get all the submissions in the world that I want, but I figure this will be really cool. It's a chance for everybody to talk about the cool stuff they want to do. So check that out. And I think that's it. So Masonic Podcast, Whence Came You, Sunday nights, 9:30 on Sundays. And we got a really cool series going through on Midnight Freemasons. Also, if you're into Masonic symbolism in movies and pop culture, some guys are in, some guys aren't. But we got Darren Lawners is doing a sweet series on the Matrix. So check it out. Thanks for watching, listening, and getting your daily Masonic goods stuff.
Nice.
Through the interwebs.
Some really good philosophy in the Matrix, so I'm super stoked about that.
Yeah, it's a good series. It was one post that I had to split into like 4 because it was just really long. Sorry, Darren.
Cool. Thanks. Jason, you're up.
All right. So, John and Robert have said that, with esoterics and philosophy, some folks get it and some folks don't. I'm one of those folks who really struggles with esoterics and just, figuring out the meaning of it. And but I love learning about the history, and I love learning about the philosophies, even if it's really hard for me to just wrap my head around them. So I learned a whole lot this episode. I was quieter than I usually am, but it was an awesome episode. I love the fact that on this show we can really dabble in everything that Masonry has to offer, whether it be history, philosophy, arts, sciences, what you name it. So that's awesome. Last couple days of No Shave November. Go ahead and donate. It'd be awesome. I'll send you some pins if you donate $25 or more to my name. So thanks so much for helping us get over $1,000. I know the official site said something like 983, but we did have a couple folks who just donated directly to No Shave, and then also a couple folks who donated to TMR asked to No Shave. So thanks so much for engaging in this little bit of giving back with us, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week.
Yay! Thank you.
Ooh.
So yeah, as Robert said, I nerded out on this. I think this is fascinating. It's something I've been dabbling with, and so I hope you guys have benefited from some of the things that we've picked up along the way. One of my favorite aspects that I've alluded to in other episodes is the concept of mentalism. That is another key concept of Hermeticism, that all is mind and thought drives action. And so, In other words, to create something, you have to think of it first. So before creation was the thought of creation. And that same thing is true for you and how you practically apply, your daily vocations, your ability to influence society depends on how your attitude, whether you call it, the secret or law of attraction, all is mind, and focusing on what you want to create will hopefully make that thing come true. And to that point, found a great end quote for tonight's episode, which comes from Hermes Trismegistus himself. It's a little long, but it summarizes everything quite well. If then you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot apprehend God, for like is known by like. Leap clear of all that is corporal, and make yourself grown to a like expanse with that greatness which is beyond all measure. Rise above all time and become eternal. Then you will apprehend God. Think that for you, too, nothing is impossible. Deem that you, too, are immortal, and that you are able to grasp all things in your thought, to know every craft and science. Find your home in the haunts of every living creature. Make yourself higher than all heights and lower than all depths. Bring together in yourself all opposites of quality, heat and cold, dryness and fluidity. Think that you are everywhere at once, on land, at sea, in heaven. Think that you are not yet begotten, that you are in the womb, that you are young, that you are old, that you have died, that you are in the world beyond the grave. Grasp in your thought all of this at once, all times and places, all substances and qualities and magnitudes together. Then you can apprehend God. But if you shut up your soul and your body and abase yourself and say, I know nothing, I can do nothing, I'm afraid of earth and sea, I cannot mount to heaven, I know not what I was, nor what I shall be, then what have you to do with God? Thanks for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.